I want to ask you now. So you were a private in the Army?
I went in as a private, yeah.
You went in as a private, and you eventually became an intelligence officer in the Marine Corps?
Correct.
What does it mean to be an intelligence officer? What sort of training do you go through, and what sort of tasks do you do? Because I don't think people hear it and really understand what that means.
First of all, let's talk about intelligence. Intelligence is the art of collecting information but it's not just blanket collection. It's focused collection of information to meet informational requirements of the supported entity. You collect the information, then you assess the information, you process it, so it stops just being raw data, and now it's factored in with other things, and it's factored into the mission, into a product that is usable by the consumer to achieve a certain objective. So intelligence is a finished product that's put out there, but intelligence is also the whole process of making that happen. We talk about the intelligence collection cycle, where you have direction. The boss directs, I need to know this. Collection is taking the various capabilities and collecting the data necessary to answer that question. And then you have direction, collection, assessment, and then you feedback. So it's a loop. The assessments part, where you bring in all the other outside information, you polish and finish up a finished product, and then you brief the consumer. And then what happens at that point in time is that he'll refine his or her collection requirements and say, okay, thank you for that, but now I need to know this. And then the cycle begins all again. An intelligence officer plays a role in various aspects of these things. But then you have different kinds of intelligence. You have combat intelligence. You can have strategic intelligence. You can have tactical intelligence. It's different missions that you're supporting. In the other services, each one of these things is a specialized intelligence skill. But in the Marine Corps, at least when I went in, the 0202 amphibious intelligence officer did everything. So we were expected to be able to do it all, and it was the best job in the world. When I went into the officer training, they call it the basic school. It's after you go through officer candidate school, you get your commission, and then you spend 6 months at the basic school, where you learn how to be an infantry platoon commander. Every Marine is a rifleman. Every Marine officer is capable of leading a rifle platoon in combat. After the basic school, you go on. You can be a pilot, you can be a lawyer, you can be an intelligence officer, you can be whatever. But all of those, no matter what your job is, at the end of the day, if the enemy came through the wire, you would be able to assemble Marines, organize them into, basic, fire teams, squads, platoons, and lead them in ground combat, because that's the heart and soul of the Marine Corps. So halfway through the basic school, these guys come in from headquarters Marine Corps. They're the monitors. They're the career planners, and they set up their different booths. So infantry, everybody wants to be. If you're a Marine, you want to be infantry. So join the infantry 0302. Go in there, and they these guys, they show them being lifted up out of helicopters, jumping out of airplanes, leading, doing the traditional Marine stuff. Good stuff. Armor, tanks, man, get into tanks. You're the Marine Corps version of General Patton. Boom. Artillery, laying down, Queen of Battle, laying down the firepower. It's awesome. Amtracks, pilots. Then they had logistics, because not everybody can be a Marine officer. Some people have to do the pride don't ride without motor T. You need to get the trucks out there and all that stuff. They had all that, and everybody's going through, because you had to pick your top three. You had to pick what your number one was, your second one, and you submit them. And then what the Marine Corps does is take a look at your standing in the basic school and then the needs of the Marine Corps, and generally, and then they split it up. So they take the top 1/3, they put it here, and they spread it out. The idea is to spread out, but you tend to get one of the three that you put in. But over in the corner was this guy at the intelligence booth, and nobody was there. So I went up to him and I said, "What do you do?" He said, "Well, I'm intelligence." And I said, "Why is no one here?" And he said, "Well, because you can't be an intelligence officer straight out of the basic school. You got to go do 3 years of combat arms first. You got to be an infantry, armor, artillery. And then at the end of 3 years, if you want to be an intelligence officer, you can lateral move into it and do it. So I'm just here to tell people that at some point in time in their career, they may want to come be an intelligence officer. And I said, what do you do in the intelligence? And he started explaining it. You do everything. Everything. Everything an infantry officer does. Scout sniper platoon. Intelligence officer commands a scout sniper platoon. Artillery, you're running the target detection, you're forward observing, you can adjust. Armor, you're running the scout platoon out in front, leading the scout platoon. And I'm going, I want to do this. He said, well, you can't. I said, but I can. This is the job I want. How do I make it happen? He said, write a letter to the Commandant of the Marine Corps. So I did. And I became the first second lieutenant, direct access to the intelligence field in the Marine Corps' history.
When you say direct access, you mean you didn't have to do the 3 years?
No, I went straight in the intelligence business. And the Marine Corps didn't know what to do with me.
What are the conditions for accepting someone without those 3 years of experience?
Well,
were you like high in performing in your class? What was it that made them consider you to skip all those
there were a
3
couple
years?
things. One, I was very high performing in my class. And two, I was a Russian studies major. I spoke Russian, and my dream job in the Marine Corps was a major position at what they call the military liaison mission in Potsdam, Germany, East Germany. Basically, you spied on the Soviet group of forces in Germany. It's an elite team of guys, 14 guys that run around in souped up Mercedes-Benz vehicles, and you spy on the Russians. You take photographs covertly. You do this, that, and the other thing. They shoot at you. They ran
on the other side of the wall.
You're in East Germany. You leave Berlin and you go out on patrol, and you're patrolling around. You're allowed to do it, but there's places you're not supposed to go, but you go there anyways. You shake free of your KGB handler. You go in, you take the pictures, and you come out. James Bond stuff. And I'm like, that's what I want to do. But that was a major position. But in order to do that, I had to be an intelligence officer, and I wanted to start now. I wanted to be the best prepared person for that job. But I wrote the letter, and I said, look, it wasn't as bad. I had just published an article on Soviet history in the major, it was called Soviet Studies. It's the premier academic journal for Soviet studies. And as a second lieutenant, I published an article in that. So I said, look, I'm a published author. I have the Russian history background. I have the language. It's Cold War. I want to get into this area. I want to start now. Bring me in. So they did. But the Marine Corps didn't know what to do with me because there's no positions for second lieutenants intelligence officers. And so they sent me to 29 Palms, California, the 7th Marine Amphibious Brigade, the G2. And I remember showing up, and they were all going, what do we do with you? They didn't know what to do with me. So, which is a good thing, because what happened is normally if you're the low man on the totem pole, there's a bullet down there that says low man on the totem pole. And you go right into the low man on the totem pole. I slid in and there was no billet position. And so I became the guy that did all the stuff that that nobody else could do because there wasn't time. So my first project was to do the combat intelligence annex for the war plan for Iran.
And
which
this
means
is
I had
the
to
rapid
take
deployment force?
This is part of the rapid deployment force. We were ready to deploy at a moment's notice to the Middle East to respond to any threat. And so I did something that normally is done by a major and a lieutenant colonel. As a second lieutenant, I had to sit down and train myself to read. And, they gave it to me thinking, well, he can't do it. I come in with a finished product that blew their minds away, and they're like, damn. And so now I got to do all sorts of stuff that second lieutenants aren't meant to do.
So what did this intelligence gathering look like specifically for the Iran war?
Well, for the Iran war, basically what I was doing was going through lines of communication, route surveys. So I would have to go and get the intelligence on, what the status of the roads were, what the road construction was, when was the last time, how much weight the road could handle over a period of time. If you have a bridge, what's the capacity, the load capacity of the bridge. And then the other thing was if we need to bomb that bridge, what do we need to hit the bridge with? So I had to go through the targeting deck and make sure that if they 5 years ago had done a target workup for that bridge, that the Iranians hadn't upgraded the bridge and make sure that the munitions that we were going to put on the bridge met the current requirements. So that's that. And then the other thing you do is you have to review, because one of our things was to respond to a potential Soviet invasion. So I had to sit there and project what a Soviet invasion would look like. And then you have to come up with courses of action and lay out, the different possibilities. And then, you have to say, I think this is the most likely, this is the second most likely, and it goes into the briefing package to the commanding general. So as a second lieutenant, I'm briefing the commanding general on this thing, and it was just great exposure.
Yeah, that's impressive.
Great exposure. And then I remember they wanted me to. They liked what I was doing. They wanted me to succeed. So to succeed, you need command time, and so they wanted to get me into an infantry battalion because there's a scout sniper platoon in your battalion, and you become the commander of the scout sniper platoon. And so I was positioned to go there. We had an artillery unit, 5th Battalion, 11th Marines. And the intelligence officer got fired. He was the third in a row to get fired. And the reputation was that the battalion commander just hated intelligence officers. And he got fired, and now they need an intelligence officer. And I remember getting called in to the Colonel Hammond, and he says, Scott, I'm sorry. And I said, what, sir? He goes, I got to send you to 511, and this might be the end of your career because they just chew you up. And I'm like, well, okay. So I go down to 511. I remember coming in and I introduced myself. I have a staff sergeant, I have a corporal, and intelligence chief. I say, I'm a lieutenant. I said, what do we do? And they said, well, that's your job, sir. You're intelligence officer. I said, no, but you just tell me, what are we supposed to be doing here? And they said, well, basically we're supposed to be finding targets, better targeting and survivability for the battalion. I said, well, I don't know anything about that. I said, where do I go to learn that? And they said, well, go to the 3 shop, talk to the master guns, and maybe he can get you some schools. So I went in and I met the master guns. I said, hey, I'm dumber than dirt. I'm the intelligence officer. I need to know what you do so I can support you. So you have to train me to be you so I can support you better. And he said, okay, we're going to send you to 5 direction school. We're going to send you to forward observer school. We're going to do all this stuff. And I said, sign me up. I'm in. And then I went back. The major came in, who was the S3, the operations officer, and he was angry because his feeling was that the intelligence officer worked for him. But command and staff procedures, the intelligence officer works for the battalion commander on an equal basis with the operations officer. And so he comes storming into my office in front of my staff sergeant for my corporal. It's my first day. And he starts screaming at me, yelling at me. And I'm looking around and going, okay, this can't. So I stand up and I say, with all due respect, sir, shut up. You're in my office. You can't talk to me that way. I'm a staff officer in this battalion staff on equal standing with you before the commander. So you do not come in here and you do not address me like this in front of my staff sergeant and for my corporal. If you have a problem with me, we can go outside. We can talk about it man to man. But you get the hell out of my office. You never talk to me like. And he starts screaming at me. So the XO, who I haven't met yet, comes out of his office and he hears this and he takes the S3 in. And I think I'm going to be fired day one. I think I'm done. And I hear yelling in there, and all of a sudden they go into the battalion commander, who I have not met yet. And so he's yelling at the 3. The next thing you know, the door slams, and the X3 marches down the hallway. He was fired. So they call me in. And the battalion, so I report, Lieutenant Ritter reporting his order, sir, reporting, I give him out. He goes, so you're the intelligence officer, huh? I said, yes, sir. And he goes, what does that mean to you, intelligence officer? What do you do for me? I said, sir, intelligence drives operations. It's a school solution. And he goes, do you believe that? I said, yes, sir, I do. He goes, good, because I just fired the S3. You get to write the annual training plan. Train my battalion to be ready to fight the new Soviet war. I'm a second lieutenant. And now I've been told to write the annual training plan for a field artillery unit. And I did. And it just took off, and it was the best experience in the world. But I did things like down at Camp Pendleton, they had something called a Q-36 radar. It's a target finding radar. So basically, you plant the radar. If the enemy fires artillery, it tracks the artillery, predicts the impact area, but it also can reverse it back to where it was fired. It's just sitting in Camp Pendleton. Nobody ever brought it out. So I started bringing out the radars, and I would use it not only to adjust fire on targets, but I would use it to move my guys. I would tell them, look, the Soviet standard is once you fire, within 3 minutes, rounds are going to be on your sight. If you haven't moved, you're going to be dead in war. We're getting ready to fight the Soviets. 3 minutes, you're dead. You fire, you got to move. And so what I did with the radars is when our guys fired, I would plot when the enemy would fire, and then I'd be there, and 3 minutes later, on the clock, you're dead, you're done, you're out of it. And I remember the first battalion exercise, I killed the entire battalion. And everybody's mad at me, and the battalion commander comes in, and he was mad at me too. I said, sir, you told me to be realistic. I'm telling you right now, the Soviet standard's 3 minutes. None of these guys cleared station in 3 minutes after they fought. They're all dead. We just lost the war. And he listened to me, and he's like, okay, we got to get better. And he called the guys, and he chewed them out. And he said, when the lieutenant tells you, you got to be out of here in 3 minutes, you got to be out of here in 3 minutes. So we did that. We got them moving. We had to practice aircraft. I remember they made me the battalion air officer, a lieutenant intelligence officer. I had to go learn how to fly OV-10s, not fly, but to be the back seat in OV-10 so I could do forward air control and all this stuff. But I'd go down to the what they call the air conference, and I'd just sit around and wait till they have so many hours that pilots have to fly, and so they allocate them. If you need an aircraft, you put a bid in for it, and if you don't bid it, then the squadrons get to fly any way they want to. So I waited for everybody to do their bidding, and once they were done, I came in and I said, okay, how many A6 hours do you have? I want all those hours. How many F4 hours? I want all those hours. And I got all the hours, and then I would build these training exercises where I put the battalion in the field, and I'd have aircraft come in and do coordinated artillery air coordination the way we're supposed to. Nobody did before because nobody thought to bring in the airplanes. They always did. Something's called suppression of enemy air defense. Enemy air defense is here. If an airplane's coming in to drop a bomb, they're going to fire at it. So artillery's job is to suppress the enemy air defense, and then the plane comes in, and then you get it front door and back door. But it's all timing, because you don't want the airplane over the target while the artillery shells are landing. So you've got to practice the airplane hitting its IP. You have to time it so you're firing, line of flight, it's hitting, lifts, plane drops bomb on target. As it goes away, you hit it again to shut the door to make the, and it requires timing. We were the best SEAD battalion in the world because I had aircraft flying in every single training mission. We were doing real world bomb drops, using it just went on and on and on. I revolutionized my battalion as a lieutenant. It wouldn't have happened if I had done it the normal way, and because of that, I got a good reputation, and that's how I got picked to be a weapons inspector in the Soviet Union, because my battalion commander told Headquarters Marine Corps, don't send him back to the Fleet Marine Force. He needs to be doing something bigger than that. And so they found a bigger job for me, and that's how I got to be a weapons inspector in Russia.
This video is sponsored by you. That's because we don't have any sponsors. All we have are supporters like yourself. So please consider making a contribution to our channel. You can give to us via the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description of this video. That way, we can continue to fly guests like Scott Ritter to our studio for an insightful podcast from which we can all benefit, like the one you're watching right now. So please consider making a contribution. Thank you for your support.
Trust nothing. No